What's up, everybody, and welcome to the Golf 360 podcast. I'm the host, Pete Popovich. So you may be asking yourself, what is Golf 360? And Golf 360 is a show that was designed to introduce you to people associated with the game of golf to help you improve not only at your game, but also your life. Almost all of our guests are from within the industry in some way, shape, or form, but some of the guests we have are from outside the industry, and it mainly revolves around the business world with a few others scattered in here and there. Now, all of the guests that we have a few things in common. One, they all were highly successful and accomplished in their field. Two, each has something to pass along that will help you in your game and your life. And three, they were all more than willing to give back by passing along the things that they use to help them in their career, and even some of the mistakes that they made so that others don't make them in their journey. So I hope you find listening to them as enjoyable as I did interviewing them, and that each and every one of you benefits from the information that they so willingly and graciously pass along. This podcast is brought to you in part by Just Thrive Probiotic. You may be surprised to learn that your digestive system is the key to creating and maintaining the quality of your physical, mental, and emotional health, and it's one of the body's most essential systems. That's why the majority of nutritionists today highly recommend probiotics as an indispensable nutritional supplement. As a discriminating consumer, you've probably been searching for a probiotic that is proven, potent, and effective, and you found it. Just Thrive is your best choice for maintaining a healthy lifestyle. Just Thrive Probiotic captures the power of hundreds of thousands of years of nature's design with a specialized bacillus strain formulation that guarantees survivability through the stomach and upper digestive system. Supports optimum gut health, digestive health, immune health, and delivers antioxidants. Great for adults, kids, and the whole family. Use promo code GOLF360 at www.thriveprobiotic.com for 10% off your order. This podcast is brought to you in part by Old South Golf Links. A short ride across a bridge from Hilton Head Island is one of the area's finest golf courses and a hidden treasure. Set up on towering pines and ancient oaks with sweeping marsh vistas, truly makes Old South Golf Links a one-of-a-kind golfing experience. The Clyde Johnson design was named one of the top 10 new public courses when it opened, and it also takes full advantage of the natural beauty of the Low Country. Old South is a fun and unique challenge for golfers of every skill level and a favorite of both locals and visitors. Whether it's your first time here or you're a regular, you'll be treated and feel like family. From the bag drop to check-in at the fully stocked pro shop with both men's and women's apparel, to breakfast or lunch before or after your round, the staff is always ready and willing to help. Experience for yourself why Old South is one of the premier golf courses in the Hilton Head area and why it will quickly become a favorite of yours too. Visit them in person or online at www.oldsouthgolf.com, or to make it tee time, simply call the pro shop at 843-785-5353. Hey, what's up, golfers? For any of you who have ever wondered what it was like to prepare for, to put on and host one of golf's major championships, then you're going to find today's guest and show extremely interesting. My guest today might not be a household name to the golfing public, but to the highest echelons of people within the industry, he is extremely well respected. And that is because for 21 years of his career, he was the chief agronomist at the USGA and was very instrumental in helping prepare for, run, anything that you can imagine that dealt with any of their 14 major championships, ranging from the U.S. Junior girls and boys tournament all the way up to our nation's marquee event in the U.S. Open. Just a little teaser, he does shed a little bit of light on some of the major gaffes that have happened over the past, let's say, 25 years at the Open, but you're going to have to listen deep in the show to find out what those are. We also get into discussion on technology and its effect on the game, but not from the golf equipment side, more so from the agronomy side. So how hybrid grasses have advanced over the past 20, 25 years, how equipment on that side of the game has changed, things as simple as mowers and GPS systems and watering systems and so on. All of these things that when golfers sit around and talk about technology and its effect on the game that we never really think about. So he sheds a lot of light on that. I was lucky enough that our schedule synced up and we were able to sit down at his house. He's been a very good friend of mine for 20 years. I think, again, you're really going to find what he has to say interesting, insightful, and informative. So please give a big Golf 360 welcome to my dear friend and guest today, Mr. Tim Moraghan. All right, Tim, thanks for coming on the show. Welcome to the Golf 360.
Thank you.
Finally got you pegged down.
It was a little bit difficult getting here, huh?
You're all over the world and the planet.
I do get around.
Seems like every time I reach out to you, it's the text or the call, the message is, what hemisphere are you in? And is it okay to call? But I think we're going to have a lot of fun, a lot to talk about with your career and your life in and around golf. But I want to get started, as I do with most guests, kind of going back to your start in golf. You come from a golfing family. Is that right?
Yes, it is. My dad was a wonderful player. His brother was a wonderful player. My cousin actually was a Wake Forest golfer back in the 70s and never cracked that team of Strange, Haas, Hoke. But he was on that team, and I didn't get the golfing genes, as you can attest watching my swing. I did get the shoveling genes, but that's how I got into it. I started as a little kid, shagging balls for my dad, and he used me as a target, which explains a lot of things. And then as we grew up in northwestern Connecticut in a wonderful spot, a gorgeous colonial town called Litchfield, Connecticut. And you did three things. You either hunted, fished, or played golf. My dad did all three, and I'd follow him to the golf course because I wanted to fish. And it just led from one thing to another, from shagging balls to caddying. Turned 16, you want something, you got to get a job. And I wanted to work outside. And our club was in the middle of a 5,500 nature preserve, the Elaine White Foundation. So I was in the woods. I loved it. And that's how I got started. And then went from there. Actually, my dad's caddy, when he played amateur golf in Connecticut and New England, is a gentleman named Fred Mita, who he got into the business. Fred came down to the Carolinas in the early 70s, got into the business. Was very successful, has won the Distinguished Service Award for the Carolina Superintendents Association. And my dad said, well, I got out of college. What are you going to do now? I said, I'll go to work on a golf course. He said, not up here, you're not. And I said, why? He said, you're going to be working on the golf course for 6 months and then bars the other 6 months. So he said, we're going to send you down south. So I came to Myrtle Beach in 1978, went to work for Fred Mead at Myrtle Beach National, which led me to Pinehurst, worked at the resort, took care of courses 3 and 5, which led me to the TPC at Ponte Vedra, working for Pete, and who unfortunately left us the other day and will be missed. There's a lot of accolades about Pete, and that was an interesting experience, which led me to Dallas, Texas for the Byron Nelson Las Colinas Sports Club. Kind of rebuilt that, got it ready for the Byron Nelson stint with American Golf, which was interesting because it's public golf, and that's most of the people in this country are daily fee players. So that was an interesting side of the business. And eventually to the United States Golf Association for 21 years. And
now you have Aspire Golf, right?
Aspire
That's
Golf.
the name of your company?
Yes, Aspire Golf.
I mean, people can get on your website and look at it, but can you just kind of elaborate, touch on each of the things that you do?
Yes. Back, it's been 10, 12 years ago now, the USGA kind of redirected the careers of a lot of us senior staffers, and I didn't really know what I was going to do at that time, and I kind of always wanted to see if I was halfway smart enough to do it on my own. And I said, well, give it a shot. And, of course, that was the worst time we could do. It was 2008. The economy tanked, and, golf is a niche sport, so who knew how much business you were going to get. But I started Aspire, and Aspire, the name came from a dear friend of my wife who is a creative artist and was in the subway in New York City and saw it's Aspire, which means to look to be better than you are. So we started Aspire Golf, which is kind of a full service consulting entity, primarily turf grass and golf course consulting, long range plans for golf courses, construction, master planning. Not so much architecture. I mean, I know a little bit about it because I worked with some really great architects. I know enough to hurt myself, but I also know enough to recommend an architect for a club that may be looking to do something as simple as a bunker renovation or a full-blown renovation. I also did a little event management, a little experience from my time with the USGA, and then do search and recruit executive recruiting for clubs, whether it's a golf course superintendent, golf professional, or general manager.
On the course, I'll call it, for lack of better terminology on my part, design, maintenance, building, long range planning. What would that involve? If you can give a little detail on that.
It's kind of a fishbowl of things, because I have a lot of experience. I've been all over the world. I've seen every club that's any in this country, and most of them around the world. I've got a feeling for what I think is kind of the correct path a club should proceed if they ask. I would never be arrogant in telling them whatever you're doing is completely crazy, but they love their golf course. But what I would try to do from a design build, in my position, having set up golf courses for national championships, maybe the tee doesn't belong here, or a bunker should be moved, or the greens have encroached a little bit, or fairway contouring is off, trees are getting in the way, things like that. So we kind of want to point those out to people. And if it becomes to the point, and I'll give you a good example. The Oaks Country Club in Tulsa, Oklahoma. It's a wonderful old Tillinghast golf course. And the superintendent called me in, and we got talking over the course of the visit. And they had some issues, but they were coming up on their centennial. So, long story short, I sat in on the committee meetings at the end of my time with the club, and they said, it was a general question to the committee. We would like to do something for our next 100 years. So everybody's that awkward silence, and I raised my hand, and I said, well, why don't you guys rebuild your golf course? Because it's really kind of not good right now. And if you plan it right and get the right architect, the right builder, you got a great superintendent, you got a wonderful piece of land, just needs some tidying up. So that worked. So they went ahead, raised the money. They promoted it for a couple of years, got Bill Bergen in as an architect, and turned out fabulous. So now they're set. And it's kind of a little bit of a sacrifice, but, a 6 to 8 month sacrifice, as I told the members when we were speaking to their board, no one in this room will be around for the next renovation, because if you do it right, you've got 25 to 30 years before you even start to think about it again. So that's from a design build, and seeing all the great courses. And you're obviously an exceptional player, because we have played a lot of golf together. When the tee's pointed left and the hole's going right, I mean, really, I know it's kind of up to the player to figure that out, but most people aren't as good as you or me. And I'm not saying I'm good, but I know kind of which direction I want to hit the ball. Our bunker's out of position for today's game and technology. Maintenance has allowed the ball to go further. The player is stronger, the equipment is better, and the ball goes farther. So I want to point that out to clubs and try to help them along the way.
Keep the course relevant?
Relevant, yes, because it's a competitive golf industry to get people to be members at clubs, or if you're a daily fee, to come play. But fun. And on the topic of Pete Dye, I mean, Pete I love him. I mean, he was going to go down and I think he's going to get the respect and accolades that he deserves. He could beat up the best players in the world if they kind of got a little full of themselves. But the average guy, if they played the appropriate tee, would have a good time. And so we want to make them relevant and fun. None of us are that good. I mean, you could make a career playing professionally. I'm not going to, but I'm a decent amateur player. But the average handicap index, last time I checked, is about 16 or 17. That poor player's barely breaking 90 at his own club. Why does he want to have a bad time? He's not that good. So make it relevant, make it fun, make the conditions that the higher handicap, can take a 3 metal and sweep it off the grass. We're not cutting fairways at a 1/4 of an inch. Excuse me, for Tiger Woods. We're cutting it for people that are paying the dues and giving money to the club or wherever they play.
Do you see that in a lot of consulting? Because you do go all over the country, and you have gone over the world, where clubs, for whatever reason, that they want their golf course to look like a PGA Tour event, yet the vast majority of their players are going to be struggling to break 100, or they're weekend golfers. How do you manage that when you go in to consult with the course?
Well, first off, it's all based on budget. I mean, the more money you have, the more money you can spend. Most budgets are anywhere from $700,000 to $1.1 million for an 18-hole golf course, maybe even less than that in some parts of the country. So it's usually driven by the low handicap member who wants a better, harder golf course to test that individual's game. Okay, fine, but if you're at a club where there's 500 members and there's 20 people that are 5 handicap or less, why do you want to disrupt the golf course for them? Green speeds and rough heights and tight fairways, for the average golfer, we just don't need that. We need a well-maintained, healthy golf course that will allow all levels of play, all age brackets, all genders, young, old, to go out there and have fun. That's all I want to do is have fun. We don't have to, have super hard greens. We definitely don't have to have ridiculous green speeds. We need wide fairways and the ability to find that $4.80 Pro V and hit it again. It just doesn't make any sense to do it opposite. I'd rather come home at the end of my round going, I shot 75 today, and then beat myself up and shoot 88 on a real hard golf course where the conditions are over the top and not have fun. We don't want to turn people away from the game. We want to bring them into the game. And
right.
I think conditioning plays a lot into that. You can't, it's the tour, and they do what they do because those are the best players to swing. They can do anything with a golf ball but make it talk. So let them be penalized. Let them have hard conditions. But it's so inappropriate to come home and say, I want my golf course to look like what I saw on TV. Not happening. It's just not happening. One, it's based on budget. Two, labor. Labor's huge in the golf maintenance business because it's hard to get, because it's hard work. They don't pay a lot. The long hours. You're either working in the cold, the wet, the hot, or the humidity. It's not fun. So to come home and want that for your golf course, leave the tour alone. Talk to your superintendent. Get a real good idea of what you have for a budget. Talk to your director of golf. Understand the ability of the people that play the golf course and prepare accordingly.
In today's information age, do you see many courses that are looking for that technology or that great thing to do and at the expense of not paying attention to some of the simple things? And that you see common denominators where people can do some of the most generic, simple things and they're not doing it, and you can come in and say, well, look, you guys are focused on trying to make this extravagant golf course, but you're missing this little thing you can do that will improve it exponentially for your average member.
Yes, more from a turf grass health perspective. So that you always have the game's played outdoors and it's played on grass. And both are changing. They're both living, breathing entities. So, green speed, for example, and firmness, we don't have to have tabletops. The green speed, it should be based on contours and the handicap level. So do you want to go over the top? I never really understood why the worst players want the fastest greens. And you obviously are an outstanding teacher of putting, and you know what strokes look like. And you give someone a 12. No one understands what 12, 13 feet really is. And to give you a kind of a crude analogy is basically to stand on a pool table and try to keep it above the pockets from one end of the table to the other. Try not to make it, and you'll understand what putting at Oakmont or Shinnecock during the U.S. Open or Augusta during the Masters is really like for those guys. So the greens, 50% of the game is played on the greens, so make your greens fair, speed, firmness, and a lot of times they have a tendency to creep in. They get a little smaller, make sure they're the right size, and hole locations are fair. To bury hole locations where it's impossible to get the ball to makes no sense to me. That becomes a pace of play issue. It becomes an emotional issue, and people quit the game, and that's not what I want to
do. Do greens keep creeping in? Is that inevitable in that you can't cut the same direction all the time or just in two directions? You go around the perimeter of the green? I
see it more on the older courses than I do on the new ones, because the new ones will have perimeter wiring. There'll be a distinctive turf between putting green, collar, approach, rough, fairway. So, and the superintendents pay more attention to that because it costs a lot to push the greens out. The older ones that were built and didn't have much change to them, you could see old contours. You and I played here at Moss Creek in Hilton Head. Our 16th hole on the South course. I mean, this is a Fazio, George Fazio, not a Tom Fazio. George Fazio that was designed in 1972 or 3. From the back tee, it's 440. That's a big hole. Well, if you look at the original fill pad of that green, it was large. It was a huge green, one of the biggest on the properties, because back in the day, you might have had to hit 3 wood. Not 3 metal, 3 wood. Well, we changed that. and made it smaller. I don't think that's right. So you pay attention to what's going on the property so that you can manage your golf course for your clientele. Bunkers is another one. Are they misplaced? Are they too big? Are they too deep for the person that's playing? If you're a public facility and you have a pace of play you want to get people through, why do you want to put bunkers in the landing zones? Why do you want to wrap a green around a bunker for a back right hole location and make the bunker 8 feet deep? The average guy's got no chance. Now, if that's what you wanted originally, then the person that comes and plays and pays that daily fee, well, you got to know that going in. But I just think we can make the golf courses much more fair for the majority of people that play the game.
Let me ask you about grasses, because going back to when I was a kid growing up and when you were in the business, kind of getting started in the business, it seemed like there were three. There was bent, there was POA, and there was Bermuda. Correct. And in the last, I don't know, let's say 20 years, it seems like there's a myriad of hybrids out there. What is that for the betterment of the game? Is it? What's your opinion on that?
It is. It's called genetics and breeding. The plant breeders and major universities and turf farms, the science involved, it's no different than creating a racehorse. It's all about genetics. Mm-hmm. So yes, back 40 years ago, there really was bentgrass, poana, and Bermuda grass. And Bermuda grass in the South, while Dr. Glenn Burton from University of Georgia, the Tifton Extension Station in Tifton, Georgia, started to work on breeding a hybrid Bermuda grass, a finer leafed, one that could tolerate a little lower height of cut, gave you a little better green speed. It's morphed into what is called the ultra dwarf Bermuda grass as we see today, whether it's Tiff Eagle, Champion, G12, Mini Verde. These are grasses that are kind of like bent grass. They're fine leaf. They can tolerate low height of cut. And it's all researched for Bermuda grasses. There's also bent grasses. There's a plethora of bent grasses. Joe Duich, again, in 1956, you had Dr. Glenn Burton working with Bermuda grass, and you had Joe Duich making Pencross, creeping bent grass, which the cross was of 2 or 3 different bent grasses at Penn State, hence Pencross. And that's morphed into fine leaf, fine textured bent grasses that are just exquisite to putt on. And that's now morphed into fairways, tees, and roughs for both Bermuda grasses and bent grasses. The standard for you in the Detroit area, me in the Northeast, was poana, annual bluegrass, perennial bluegrass, or perennial POA, which you would see at the Great Old Classic Golf Course in Shinnecock.
Oakland Hills had
Yeah,
POA.
Oakland Hills, Baltusrol. Oakmont is famous for their perennial POA. And you can't get a better putting surface when it's right. But it's very susceptible to the detriments of the environment in the heat of the summer and the cold of the winter. But when maintained correctly, it's an amazing grass. They did try to, I think it was David Huff, Dr. Huff out of Penn State, tried it, and Dr. White from the University of Minnesota started to try to breed some of they'd go on these research trips, and they'd find this beautiful patch of perennial POA in the middle of the 5th green at Oakland Hills. And it may have taken 20 years to get that big. So there was not a lot of movement. But the grasses are just amazing. The science that's in our industry, just like you with equipment, the technology and what allows the player to hit the ball better, the technology for the golf course superintendent, the architect, the builder, it's just like anything. I just bought a new iPhone. The 11 is probably outdated now. I've had it for 2 weeks. So, the science is going on. I spoke at, I don't know where it was one at university years ago, and they're college kids. They're like, Mr. Moraghan, back when you were in the business, what's the difference? I'm like, well, we don't pull fairway units with horses, but they didn't get that one.
The teeth on the mower.
The teeth on the mower. That's a good one. But I said pretty much the processes are the same. It's kind of like the golf swing. The golf swing, you look at Snead and Jones, the golf swing is pretty much the same as you would see with Koepka and Woods or whomever. It's just the implements are different, and they're better. That's just technology. That's a progression of society. So it'll continue to go that direction. Plants are going to be bred for disease resistance, bug resistance, whatever. It's an amazing science.
I remember when one of the local clubs had the USGA team event, and this was going back, I think, around 2002, when you were still.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And the course that they had it on had had Bermuda. It was one of the strains of Bermuda. I don't remember. But one of the issues that they had was they were having a hard time getting the grain going in multiple directions to kind of align. Or has the technology in those things that were difficulties with the grasses have been advanced as well?
To some extent, yes, because you can selectively breed out lateral growth, turf layover, turf color. You can breed out its susceptibility to heat, cold, wet, dry.
That's amazing.
Oh, it is. So, but the tendencies, the genetics are there. Both Bermuda grass and bent grass are stoloniferous grasses. That means they creep laterally. They have a tendency to lay over. So you listen to a TV announcer, a player that may played a lot of golf in the 70s and 80s when we really were limited to the certain types of Bermuda and certain types of bent grass laying over, grain to the player's mentality, grain, horizontal leaf blade orientation is the technical aspect of it. They still refer to it. They see the one side of the leaf is light, one side is dark. They think the plant's laying over, growing toward the setting sun, whatever the misnomer is. But when you cut grass less than 1/10 of an inch, which is less than the thickness of a dime, it's hard for a leaf blade to lay over. Now that's more for tournaments. That's not something you want to do every day. So yes, you can kind of selectively breed that out. That's how far it's come from the 80s and 90s to what we have today. I mean, I watched it for the last 40 years, and 30 years ago, this was just a pipe dream. Some of the turf grasses that are out there today.
And can you speak to how it's changed the game? Because we obviously see, as you mentioned, technology changes. That's made players longer, the ball, the driver, the shaft. the science behind how players train nowadays, especially at the highest level, and they get stronger, and how to get stronger, how to increase speed. But nobody really speaks to the advancements on the agronomy side. And you touched on the grasses. But is there equipment in agronomy, and the ball can roll longer? It can do a whole bunch of things.
Yes, on all of those questions. Just as much as the pundits bemoan the fact that the golf ball goes too far. Well, okay, the golf ball goes far for a number of reasons. Obviously, it's better built. It's technically better than it was the old Titleist 100 Bellatas. I mean, I could throw a Pro V farther than I could hit it then with a Bellata, but Let's and we know the athletes are stronger. Flexibility is better, bigger swing arcs, faster club head speed. Well, if you got faster club head speed, guess what? Ball's going to go farther. Mm-hmm. But what they forget, and it really annoys me because they kind of just push it off to the side with one of those, oh, by the way, grass growing's better. Excuse me? Really? Grass growing? Let's prepare a fairway like a putting green. And by that I mean as I just did a project in Scottsdale at Desert Mountain. We rebuilt the Nicholas design team, Sean Emerson from the grounds department there, rebuilt the Renegade golf course. We sand capped everything. So he's got 8 inches of sand. They planted bent grass in the desert. They have a sophisticated irrigation system with, 3,000 or 4,000 heads that you can spot water almost in each individual plant. You've got multi-bladed reels. Back in the day, a greens mower may have had 9 blades. They're 15 blades now, which means the frequency of clip is tighter, so you cut more grass at a lower height. You have sand top dressing for fairways. You have growth regulation products to keep the plant from growing. Sophisticated irrigation equipment. You have fairway rollers that can. So the ball is going to land. It's almost like watching the Open Championship at a burnout course in Scotland when the place is as brown as the highway and the ball rolls forever. Well, you can do that today with internal drainage systems, sub-air units which suck the moisture out of the ground, sand top dressing, sand capping of fairways, growth regulation products, and height of cut. And the ball's going to hit the ground, and it's going to be like playing down the freeway. So, okay, I watch on TV, and okay, here you are, Pete Boffich, you're playing last week at Waialae, and you stand up, and your carry distance is 265. Let's say off a tee shot. And then they turn around and tell you the ball went 325. That's 65 yards of bounce and roll. That can be done through turf grass maintenance. The golf course superintendent can really mess with the golfer. We can either give you 50 extra yards or have the ball back up. however you want to do it, because the technology is there. So, yes, the turf grass is often forgotten, and how the better player takes advantage of the golf course.
Yeah, nobody seems to want to talk about that. Everything's the ball and the club.
They
and
think
the
it's the
athlete.
ball. I would argue, not argue, I know it's a harsh term. I would debate the fact that it's not the ball as much as the shaft. That when you can customize the shaft, which allows me to swing as hard as I want at a golf ball, and you've seen me play, there's occasionally it's okay, and there's some days it's not. But when I hit it, it goes. Well, that's not the ball, because I can hit it. Yeah, it's the shaft. Because in the wintertime, if you're playing below 55 degrees, you're not getting anything out of that golf ball anyways. It's too cold. But the shaft is going to allow me to swing hard regardless. I think it's more the shaft and the club face than it is the golf ball sometimes.
Yeah, you get
people in science, our folks at the USGA and at the RNA, they probably tell me I'm full of baloney. It's just one person's opinion.
Especially when you get into the metallurgy and then
Well, that's where you have taught me a lot in that regard. You can change the dynamics of a player. I went up and give a plug to Reynolds Plantation, which is a client of my wife's, back in the midsummer. Went to the Kingdom. I had to get new bats, and they started messing. I had an old Titleist driver with that Fujikara thing in it, X shaft, and carry distance about low 240s. Well, within about a half an hour, next thing my carry distance is in the mid 250s, and I'm an old fart, so I think this is great. So down here at sea level and humidity, the ball doesn't go that far, and conditions are a little softer depending on the level of maintenance. But I get back to New Jersey and play, and it's like everybody's looking at me. You're going to have to pee in a cup at the turn because we don't know what's going on. It's a combination of, yes, I try to stay strong, and stretch. I also try to keep up with equipment, and I use an appropriate golf ball. But it's fun. But agronomy can do a lot to either have the ball go farther, and it's neglected. I don't really care that it's not. Because a lot of superintendents, these are low-key guys. They don't like a lot of recognition. They just want to do their job and get on with it. But, no one has a clue to how hard the superintendent works, the time it takes, and the amount of effort to prepare a golf course to really make it play well.
Would you say that's one of the biggest misconceptions or myths about your side of the industry?
Oh, yeah. Everybody still thinks it's Caddyshack. Carl Spackler living in the maintenance barn, and with the bags of Moraghanite and using the backpack blower to clean up. It's not that way. These are sophisticated, highly trained, educated individuals they're on the cusp of the next most modern technology in everything from drones to mowers to robotic mowers to robotic sprayers, GPS sprayers, irrigation that'll come on based on the program you put into your central, so that it either waters one part of the golf course or not one part of the golf course. Waters too much, shuts off when it's rain or the humidity's too high. No one has a clue. And I think it really comes down to the people, in many instances, are afraid of science, because that's what it is. It's all science. It's not fertilize it, water it, mow it. That's your lawn. This is a golf course. And boy, I'm going to go to our national shows in 10 days or so, and it's just like the PGA show with all the equipment. We go down and watch. You and I sit there and go, there's too much stuff. Well, it's the same with the golf industry. There's just so much stuff to make the product better that it's mind-boggling.
It's amazing as far as everything has come in this world in the last 5 to 10 years, it kind of makes you wonder, where the hell is it going to be in another 5 to 10 years?
Well, you can't cut grass much lower, or you're going to have dirt, soil, as the professional says. And, what do we go, artificial? You got to have some sustainability. You have to be environmentally conscious. When I looked at heights of cut, there were two opens, Bethpage in 2002, and Marion in 2013, where the height of cut was 0.65. That's ridiculous. There's hardly any grass plant left at that point. And then you see Pebble, which they did a little differently. They still had speed. They had some rain and some moisture a little bit on the Pacific coast, but they're still under 1/10 of an inch. They're like 0.90 and getting speeds of 12.5 to 13 on those greens. And if you've ever played Pebble, it's just It's a tough one.
You know, if we jump back a little bit, you had mentioned working with Pete Dye at TPC. You were on the construction team?
Yeah, I came in kind of late after the process, but they were still doing a lot of work getting it ready for the 1982 Players Championship.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where I first met Pete. And the first time I did meet him, he was in a rowboat in the pond on 17 with, I know he was with Dean Beeman, the commissioner of the tour at that time. And I don't know if there was one of Dean's associates with the tour, and they were trying to determine how high the bulkhead should be on the 17th green. This was on a Sunday afternoon. I was just on the crew, and we were just waiting to do what we were told to do. And he was great. I mean, he was kind of down home guy, just super nice to everybody, super smart, very creative. Which also Alice, his wife, was also as creative. She was responsible actually for the island green at 17, not Pete. She had the original design concept there. Yeah. So everybody thinks that was Pete's creation, but Alice said, "You ought to make an island here." You know, that's how that all came from. And Pete and I stayed in contact over the years. And then when I went to work for the USGA, he played in a couple of events. Alice always played in the women's amateur. I think she tried to not qualify for the women's open. Curtis Cup, she was captain of the Curtis Cup team. And it was just a long ride. And Pete always used to bust my chops about, you make greens too fast. It takes the architecture out of it. It's not my call. I get it, Pete. I think we always laughed if we really he always wanted to mess with the players. And from a U.S. Open or, national championship perspective, it was like, you should just have the greens at 9 feet and the fairways cut at 5/8 of an inch. That'll mess with them. They won't know what to do with themselves. Well, I brought that to the table one year with the championship committee, and they just said, "No, that's not going to happen." I said, well, I mean, it is what it is. But he was great and very creative. And, of course, we had the Women's Open at Crooked Stick where he lived, and he built that one. And had the Women's Mid-Am here on Hilton Head at Long Cove. There's just so many good Pete Dye golf courses. I mean, I love playing Pete Dye golf courses. I don't care how crazy they are. It's pretty crazy. Whistling Straits, I mean, if you go to Whistling Straits, I mean, oh, my God. I mean, they've had the PGA. Now they have the Ryder Cup this year. I mean, what he did there from a just the whole mechanical aspect, earth moving, is just incredible.
Was that true that they got that land for $1?
That is the rumor. The 400 and some odd acres down in Ponte Vedra was a sale was for $1, because back in the day they called it a swamp, and what else is going to be there? No one thought Ponte Vedra would be what it is today. I mean, it is a preferred place to live.
The evolution of the course over the years, since you were there at the very beginning, good, bad? What's your thoughts on that?
It's softer than it was. It's not, I don't think, from what I haven't been there in several years, but I think it's softer than 1982.
Softer as condition or as
contours,
playability? Contours
and playability. I mean, there were greens that, hit, like we said with the pool table, stand in your bathtub and try to keep it above the drain. It was just crazy. And I think they probably went a little over top. And again, that was when the event was in February, March, that time of the year. So it was cold. We had overseeded the greens with creeping bent grass, and we had a cold winter. Didn't have the germination we wanted, so green speeds and firmness were definitely there. But, 156 players, and Jerry Pate ended up throwing Pete and Dean in the lake on 18. And we always thought he was crazy when he dove in, because you never know what you're going to hit when you start leaping off a 6-foot bulkhead. But that was pretty special. I mean, that was my third professional tournament in the industry, and but that was the best of the best, and that whole concept was wide open. But again, you look at it over the lifespan of that golf course. I was there in '94 when Greg Norman shot whatever it was 24 or 5 under or something like that. Fuzzy was second at 20 under. They played the golf course well. And they played it as Pete wanted you to play it, and they were rewarded. Now, there might have been a little soft, and back in the day it was overseeded, tees, fairways, greens. But, we had the amateur there in '94, and, Trip Keeney and Tiger, on the 37th hole or 35th hole, and that all ended on 17.
Right.
And it's just an incredibly hard golf course for the better player because Pete's so cool in it. He says, okay, here it is. If you want to try it on 18, you want to try to cut one down the water, you better cut it. If not, you're one under. But he makes you play a draw. Probably the hardest shot to hit when the tournament's on the line is You don't want to overcook it. You're in the water. You want to hit that cut. You miss it. You're in the water.
You and I have talked a lot about setups at Opens or national championships, and the best way to get into the elite player's head is to make him have indecision.
Correct.
Make them start to think, get out of their comfort level, because now they're not.
That's what separates the Hogan, the Nicklaus, the Wood, Tiger Woods from the rest of them is they don't let it get into their head. They got to figure it out. And I told you the story like at Pebble with Jack. He won the Open a couple of times at Pebble, and what his last Open in 2000, we always walk a couple of holes every Tuesday. He and I'd walk 4 or 5 holes.
Jack Nicklaus.
Yeah. So we'd walk and talk about the setup, and then go back to the same. Anyways, this is how the great ones think. He said, we're standing on 3 green, and we were talking about hole locations. And he said, it doesn't matter where you stick the hole. Well, why is that? He said, Tim, how big are these greens? So we worked together in 90, 91 to restore it for the 92 Open. And I said, they're 3,000 square feet. He said, that's right. He says, you guys will come in 3 or 4 paces from the edge. He says, as matter of factly, as I'm going to tell the story, Jack said, all I have to do is hit it in the middle of the green on every hole, and I got a 10-footer for birdie. He said, these guys haven't figured that out yet. And I'm like, he says, now, when you go back, and he knew I played at Baltusrol. He said, when you go back to Baltusrol next week, think about that. When I see you at the Senior Open, tell me how you played. I was like, holy crap. 19 majors mean zippity-doo-dah. The great ones think differently. They just don't let it bother them. They figure out a way to make it work for them. And so the contrary is from the governing bodies. Tour, R&A, USGA, PGA, they're trying to mess with the player to get them out of that comfort zone because they know how much talent those guys have. They really do. It's sick what they can do with a golf ball.
Yeah, it's the indecision. And you look at Augusta National, they put I don't know what their language is for it, the first cut, I think you're supposed to call it. But that just throws those players in a little bit of indecision, and when you're looking at the greens of Augusta, you better be extremely finite with your distance control. Positional.
Be positional on those greens to benefit from it. It's all course management. At Augusta, that first cut, anywhere from a half to 3/4 of an inch, takes enough spin off the golf ball so that they got to be in the middle of the fairway. If they're in the middle of the fairway, they can compress the golf ball and put spin on it. If they're in the rough, get a little grass between the ball and the club face.
Yeah, they don't know if it's
all
going to hit.
All of a sudden, they lose about 20-25% of that spin rate. Hits 15, for example, got no juice on it, off the back of the green, 2 under. They're looking for the ball drop. So you can do a lot, but if patience with a player, boring golf. If I was that good and someone said, give you even par at the U.S. Open, I'm taking it because I'll guarantee I'll win a bunch of them at even par. And I'm going to be in the Hall of Fame. You
mentioned Pete Dye and Jack Nicklaus. You obviously rubbed shoulders with a lot of the elites in the game, a lot of the
very blessed
best players. What were some of the other things that you might have learned from some other? Who did you become friends with, and what did you learn from them over the years?
Well, the Jack Nicklaus story he played in the middle of the green. And that's kind of funny because you look at clubs. I deal with green committees, and everybody wants like hole location. We gotta have a hole location sheet. I think you just need green locations for most of you. Don't worry about where the hole is. Just try to get it on the green. You're not that good. But that story with Jack. Another one was with Mark O'Meara. But when I was working at Las Colinas in Dallas back in the early '80s, Mark would, he was just starting out, and we're kind of the same age, and he'd come over and practice, and we'd play. And we were playing at Pebble Beach one year. And, I was on 14, the par 5. Long story short, we're about the same off the tee, but he was a little ahead of me. I pull out 3 metal and proceed to push it out. And I was playing pretty well at the time and push it out of bounds. Make my 6 or 7, 8, whatever it was I made. I think it was made at 8. And we're walking to 16, and he's or 15. He's laughing. What are you laughing at? He says, you're the biggest dummy I ever known. I said, what are you talking about? What did you have back there? I said, what are you talking about? How many yards was it to the hole? I said, it was about 300, I guess, right? And he said, yeah. It was 304. I said, okay. So he says, what is 304? And I said, I don't know what you're talking about. He says, 165 plus 135. Hit 6-iron, 9-iron. He says, you'll make more birdies here on 14 than you will trying to hit a 3-wood up there.
Mm-hmm.
That became my whole thought process for par 5s. You're going to play a 550-yard par 5, hit it 250. You got 300 left, 6-iron, 9-iron, 2 controllable clubs. That was another lesson. Jack Burke down at Champions in Houston. I mean, I got to get very friendly with Mr. Burke back in the day when we looked at it for the U.S. Amateur. And I went down. He later had the women's mid-am, and I went in to visit, do my job. And his wife had qualified for the mid-am. So we got through, and Mr. Burke said, Timmy, you want to play some golf with me and Robin? I said, yeah, it's Jack Burke.
No,
sure.
I can't. I got a dentist appointment.
I got to go home and, read the rules of golf. And so long story short, he said, well, you and Robin, I'll meet you down the back end of the range when you're done. Hit some balls, and I'll take a look at your swing. Okay, fine. So I'm grinding it out down there, and he comes down. He's watching. And I said, okay, what do you think? And he said, well, I'll tell you one thing. You're not Neiman Marcus. I said, okay. He said, but your C is in Roebuck, and that'll hang on that swing will stick with you for a long time. And he said, why are you trying to do this and that? And one thing, he said, why are you trying to hit driver? And I said, what are you talking about? I said, you USGA types, most of the golf courses you're going to play, your par 4s are 380, 390. Hit 3-wood. You hit your 3-wood, 240. You'll have 140 left. And I said, yeah, what's that mean? He said, practice your 8-iron. So, again, you know what it comes. Each one of those stories, Jack, Mark, and Mr. Burke, all revolved around course management. Staying within your game, hitting the correct shot that you can depend on. How many times have we played with the A personality types at par 5? I got to get their driver 3 medal.
Right.
Well, yeah, but we're still made 5. I'm just hitting them maybe, maybe on a short par 5, or let's say 520. Hit a 3 medal, hit a 5-iron, have a pitching wedge, sand wedge into the green. Now you've got 3 controllable shots. So I think in looking at it from my position, we teach the PGA, you the golf instructor. All you guys are so super talented. You teach people how to swing a golf club, but you don't teach them how to play golf. And that's what these old history guys, they try to learn how to play golf. Byron Nelson learned how to play golf. Hogan would learn how to play golf. They could do what they wanted with a golf ball, but they were trying to get the ball around in as few strokes as possible. So I think course management is a lost art. Yeah,
in the schools that I teach, people come out for a 3-day school, and we'll get in the short game, and I'll ask them to hit a 30-yard shot, and they'll do it if they can execute it well. I said they usually can't control either trajectory and spin simultaneous. Mm-hmm. Like that's a very good player that can do that. And I explained to them, I said, how many times have you ever seen Tiger, Phil, Justin Thomas, DJ? You take your pick of the tour, or the ladies, it doesn't matter what tour it is. I said, how many times have you ever seen them inside of 70 yards unless they're up at the green? And they'll think, well, I'd never do. I said, right, because they know how far they hit their highest lofted wedge at, let's say, a controlled half swing. And if they can't get to that distance, then they're knocking it up right next to the green. But they are never in that gray area. So why are you trying to master a shot that they don't master, and they're playing for their living?
Yeah.
And that kind of turns a light on.
It's course management. Right, and it's the same thing here. I play with people here at Moss Creek, and we got a couple of shorter par 5s. And, I might hit 4 metal off the tee. I remember one of the guys, what are you doing? I said, what do you mean what I'm doing? You're going to hit 4? Why didn't I hit driver? Well, one, I hit the 4 metal farther than you hit the driver, so that's going to help me. But it's a controllable club. Our North course there's some holes that are very tight. I'd rather hit 4 metal on a 500-yard par 5 and hit a 7-iron and hit a pitching wedge, make my 5 because par is a good score. I'm still in that USGA mentality where par is the ideal score for the hole being played, and then move on to the next hole, make another par. And there was a great female women's player, Tish Pruce. Tish played in all the women's events, and we were doing a thing for the women's amateur. And she made 18 straight pars, and I played halfway decent. I said, boy, that's boring. She's boring is good. She went out and made 18 straight pars. And she was going to play in the women's amateur, so she's trying to make, in match play, I'm going to make 18 straight pars, Pete. You're going to have to make 17 and a birdie to beat me.
Right.
So who's the pressure on? I'm just going to make par. So people kind of lose perspective on that.
Let me go into what the bulk of your career was, and that was USGA, right? You were there how long?
21 years.
What did you start at a certain position and stay there, or did you start at one position and work your way up? What was that? How did that?
A little bit of both. I was hired in 1986 to be part of the USGA Green Section, which is the Turf Advisory Service, course consulting as they call it today, and then work in our Rules and Competitions Department. With my tournament background, being a superintendent and laborer and assistant for courses that had professional events, they wanted someone that kind of knew the whole tournament aspect. To work with the superintendent, support them, be the intermediary between the non-agronomic staff person in charge and the club and the grounds department. So that's kind of what I started. And it morphed into a lot of different roles over 21 years, but that was kind of the public persona. And, I will tell you, people that know me, I am critical of the mothership on occasion, and rightfully so. But without that 21 years, I wouldn't have anything that I have. I wouldn't have met you, for crying out loud. I wouldn't have had a great friend in you. But I owe everything to them, even though in the end it wasn't pretty for a lot of people.
How did the opportunity come about?
Well, wow. I was working in Miami, Florida for the American Golf Corporation. I managed half a dozen public golf courses for them. And I got a call from a gentleman named Bill Benjafield, who was the national director of the Green Section. And they were looking for an agronomist position in the Southeast. And in the regional director was a gentleman named Monty Moncrief. That was just a super smart turf guy, old school, and just kind of, traversing the southeastern region. I worked in South Carolina, North Carolina, Texas, and Florida. And allegedly I did a good job, so my name came up. And I interviewed in Atlanta for a position, an agronomist position in the Southeast. That went to a guy named John Foy, and John was a dear friend. We worked together for a long, long, long time. And I said, okay, no big deal. I'm living in Miami Beach. I got a great job with American Golf. I'm just going to go back to work. And a year later, they called me again. Bill called again, said, hey, we've got 2 positions open. You interviewed so well. But, he explained, and it was rightfully so. John fit the profile better and for Florida. At the time, we were just going to have a separate person for the 1,000 golf courses in Florida. And he called me back, so we have 2 positions. We have an agronomist position in the Northeast, but we just started this new position, a championship agronomist. And he explained the whole thing, working with the clubs. And he said, frankly, I'd like you to just take the job. But you have to go interview. So I went up to Golf House, and I interviewed with Bill. The head of the business department was a guy named Chuck Smith. A couple of agronomists from the Green Section, Jim Snow and Stan Zontek. But I also interviewed with Frank Hannigan, who was the executive director at the time, and P.J. Boatwright, who was the head of the Rules and Competitions Department. And there was 3 or 4 of us that had interviews, and I got the job. And I took full advantage of it in a good way to meet people, learn things, see places, whatever it took. I mean, I was around the smartest people in golf for 21 years, and there were a few regrets, but for the most part, it was a pretty good ride.
I remember when you gave a talk to the local PGA chapter on, what's involved in putting on a major event. A women's open, senior open, champions, whatever they call it now, big open, amateur, the list, junior, the list goes down the line. Can you take those, everyone listening, just not through all of that, because that would be here forever, but kind of what you did. So let's say Moss Creek, where we are now, where you live, it is going to have a host a U.S. Open. What would the process be, and how far out would that process start?
Well, the whole process, unless it's changed, and I'm not privileged to that anymore, but the whole process was the club wanting one of our 14 national championships would have to submit a letter, an invitation that we would like as a club to host XYZ event. Now, a lot of clubs we want the U.S. Open. Well, it's not that simple. There's a lot of moving parts to the U.S. Open. It requires a lot of space, a lot of time, a lot of volunteers, a lot of people, and a lot of money to put it all on. So I was one of the people that if I was at a club and someone would say to me, "Hey, Tim, how do we get the women's amateur?" Well, this is what you do. Do you think we could host the women's amateur? Well, that's part of my job. I'm not the ultimate decision maker by any means, but I have input on, could you do it or could you not do it? And, I would look for, obviously, the caliber of the golf course, the conditioning, because that's more, I think more important than the design is can we get championship conditions? And I want to go on the championship thing. This is kind of a beef of mine. I get so many real estate people and developers and clubs that, they advertise, we're a championship golf course. Well, let me tell you one thing. If you have not had a championship, you're not a championship golf course. Okay, so let's get that on the books right now. So anyways, I would be one that would look at everything from the design, the conditioning. I'd look at the superintendents. Do they have the staff? Do they have the equipment? Is it the right time of year to play the event? Is it going to test the competitor? Do we have a good practice range, short game area, putting green? Can we get the course in the right condition? Is there, and then just from an ancillary perspective to help our other staff people in charge, do we have hotels? Can we get airports? Can we have volunteers? Are there restaurants? You're bringing 156, or in the case of the U.S. Amateur, you're bringing 312 competitors into an area. So you're taking care of 1,000 people. I mean, competitor, caddy, wife, husband, spouse, significant other, swing coach, whatever. So there was a lot of moving parts. And that's kind of what I did as I morphed through my time. And there's just so much involved with it that it's really not a simple thing. Back when I started, it was kind of, and I'll put in air quotes, it was a simple process. The USJ would go to certain type of clubs and we'd move on. But then all of a sudden we said, wow, we can make a lot of money at this. And now we started looking for bigger sites. I think the best thing the USJ did was to bring this country's national championship to a daily fee facility and going to Bethpage, eventually Torrey Pines. But Bethpage was a true public golf course. At the time, the USJ had a membership. You can become a member of the USJ. 70 some odd % of the people that were members were daily fee players. They're not playing Oakmont, Oakland Hills, Balderstraw, Winged Foot unless they get an invite from someone they know. Well, to grow the game and to go to Bethpage, the ultimate in daily fee facilities where you're sleeping in your car, that kind of stuff. And it's a fabulous golf course, but it was just not in good shape. But it all morphed into to have that event, and then of course to have Tiger win, which did so much to develop all aspects, all races, all creeds, all genders to come play the game. I mean, he's kind of the Muhammad Ali of golf.
Pied Piper.
Perfect. So he wins, and that's great for the game. But that takes a lot. That piece of property was 1,500 acres. It was right after 9/11. We had, I don't know how many thousands of undercover people on the ground. We had the Navy, the Air Force, the Coast Guard, local police, state police from Jersey, Connecticut, New York. Everything. It's a huge, huge undertaking. We had a staff of 30 people just to run the Open, and let alone try to put a merchandise tent in on 5 acres, a TV compound, a media center. You look at how the Masters is run. It's fabulous what they do. It's a huge, huge event. Pardon me. So it's not that simple. So that was kind of part of my role. But primarily the public persona was, he's working with the club to prepare their golf course and do some of the setup things, rules, and the whole locations and all that kind of stuff too.
Would you start at a certain time frame before the tournament and then work towards?
Okay, so let's say Moss Creek, we had all the committee people come in, and here we are in Hilton Head. Moss Creek has had some other events. They have everything that's there for the event to occur. And they get awarded the 2020 now, so they get awarded the 2029 U.S. Open. As soon as it's awarded, I start working with the club. So I'm an advanced person. So I would work with them for the next 8 years. Once we got to their Open, my job is, they're done. I'm worried about 2030. And that's kind of how it went. So I would start as soon as we signed an agreement. And it was it was regardless of it was the U.S. Open or the Girls Junior. I would devote, if the Girls Junior needed a frequency of visits and help, and we wanted to do a certain site, well, that was part of my job.
And your advisement, it would be on course setup and getting the course ready, tuned up, maybe moving tees, moving fairways, as well as all the other ancillary things?
All of the above.
There we go. All right, so we were talking about how far in advance you start with a club, and then what you're working on as far as setup in the course and so on.
Well, as I said earlier, as soon as the agreement was signed, regardless of the championship, I'd start working with a club and our individual staff people in charge of, again, whether it was the Girls Junior or the U.S. Open. And there'd be a lot of flying around the country and kind of coordinate what the staff person in charge would want to do to the golf course from a setup and preparation aspect to help in the club, and more importantly, working with a golf course superintendent.
How much, once a club signs a contract with USGA, they're gonna host whatever event, how much say or input do they have in what's done? Or does the USGA come in and have complete control?
That's a good question. I would tell you early on, I think PJ pretty much had in his mind what he wanted to do to the golf course, but he was also open-minded enough to listen to the better players, the golf director, even more importantly, the golf course superintendent, which would, hey, Pete, can we do this to the golf course in June? And then I think on the smaller championships, we really would look for the club's input on many instances. And if we met, the obviously the opens and the amateurs, the larger events that we hosted, or we didn't host, that we put on, there was more done to the golf course. So there was more input and more club input. Because they had to vote on it. I mean, most of the time they were coming up with the finances to make the changes. So we had to have their input. And then it kind of got away from that, where I think we went down the road, well, thank you for your information, but this is the way we're going to do it. And I think that was a problem in some instances.
What the Oakmont, where they removed, I don't know how many trees, 100 or
well,
a couple
yes.
thousand or
Now
whatever
there's an interesting, that shows you how the turf grass arboriculture industry has changed in golf. Oakmont, you look at the aerials from the 30s when Phones did it. I mean, there wasn't a tree on the property. And, that was kind of part of being like, well, we got to plant a tree. And it kind of came to a huge crescendo in the 60s when we had the Beautify America programs with, Lady Bird Johnson and that part. So where do you plant trees? There wasn't that much development, so you stuck them in cemeteries or parks or golf courses. So Oakmont had at a time, they didn't want us. They had parallel fairways. I mean, 1 and 9 are parallel, and 10 and 11, and members didn't want to see other members playing golf. So they row planted the place with pin oaks and blue spruce, Colorado blue spruces, and whatever else was handy. And then, the interesting thing about trees on a golf course is they get watered and fertilized, just like the turf does in many instances, so they grow a little faster. So all of a sudden, we get to the Women's Open for 1992, and the trees are so out of control that, on the 13th is an uphill par 3. We probably played at 165, 170. And I had a snap hook to the back left hole location. Excuse me, because of the oak trees going down the left. So that wasn't going to work for the 94 Open. So Mark Coons at the time was the golf course superintendent at Oakmont, and he started covertly taking out trees. During his 10 years as the superintendent, he probably took a good portion of the trees out that didn't belong. And it's just the members started to have their golf course back. And you now, as the saying goes, you see the forest through the trees. You're like, holy crap, this is a really cool piece of property. Phones knew exactly what he was doing from an engineering perspective, and half the features that are out there never were in play because of the trees. So it just caught fire, and For the amateur in 2003, there was probably 100 or so trees left. For the open in 7, there was 5 trees left. And for the open in 16, there's 2 trees left.
Wow.
They've basically cleaned the entire property, and it's absolutely fabulous. And it's what should be done. And more classic golf courses, and golf courses in general, realizing grass doesn't grow in the shade. It doesn't grow in competition with trees. And we're bringing back the original style and form and look of the golf course and its architecture. So that's kind of what happened with Oakmont.
As far as the recovery, because if you have a major event, a USJ event, again,
go to the Open.
Pick anything you want off the list. So let's take the Open because that's the big one. How long is the recovery process for that course? And then what role did you or the USJ play with that? Or was it once the tournament's over at Sunday, you guys, hey, thanks, we appreciate the hosting and we're out of here?
There was a lot of that. Thanks, we appreciate your effort. See you down the road. But I always kind of felt bad. I from a personal aspect back in the day, I would say, if you need anything, I'd be glad to come up and support a program for the superintendent, help outline the recovery process. Because in many instances, the club would crescendo up to Sunday afternoon, and whomever would win the championship, and then everybody'd leave, and it's like, okay, now what do we do tomorrow? For 5, 6, 7 years, we've been waiting for this. Now it's over. And it's a huge emotional letdown and physical letdown when all that's done.
That wasn't part of the business plan, so to speak. As you're starting, you don't say, hey, by the way, here's what you're going to need afterwards.
It became part of it. And it became part of it, I would say, probably after Medina in 1990 and Hazeltine in 91, because that's when we really started the whole process became big time. Mm-hmm. And there was, at Hazeltine, you had all that extra space, and, we had not only the golf course, I think they probably had a perimeter of 300 acres of land to use for, corporate entities, TV, parking, merchandise, media center, et cetera, et cetera. So now you got a club wants to play golf. When they we've given up our golf course for you guys. We want to play golf. So our operational staff, headed at that time by Steve Worthy and Frank Bussey, they kind of would work with the club post-open. Mm-hmm. And if they needed anything from a turf grass perspective, I always threw it out, but I was going from one event to the other. I mean, I probably did 7, 8 in a row from end Memorial Day through the middle of October. So I was always in tournament mode for about 5, 6 months out of the year, and then the rest of the time was working with the clubs in a future site perspective.
You in your time at the USJ, you were under the tenure, the PJ Boatwright era, and then in the Tom Meeks era. What were your thoughts on the change of the setup and then I think you were already gone by the Mike David. The change of the setup, how that evolved over time.
Well, I worked with 5 individuals primarily for the setup of the larger events. PJ Boatwright at the Open, and we'll get back to that. I'll go in succession. Then it transitioned to David Eager, came over from the tour. And I did several Opens with David. He went back to the tour, and then Tom Meeks took over as the head of the rules and competition. I did 7 or 8 Opens with Tom. And then Mike Davis, who's the current CEO and executive director of the USGA today, and I did 3 Opens with Mike, 4, something like that. And then Kendra Graham, who was in charge of the women's competition. So Kendra and I did the Women's Open Amateur Curtis Cup together. So there was a difference in philosophy. I go back to PJ, and he was, par's a good score. And we had narrow fairways, put a premium on driving accuracy, which, again, you're looking at a persimmon-headed driver.
And a Bellata ball.
And a Bellata ball.
High spinning.
So a premium on accuracy, but the rough was always the rough. The goal was par. So you hit it in the middle of the fairway, however you got it to the middle of the fairway, allowed you to then have a shorter cut of turf, more club-facing ball activity, more spin. Then PJ passed away, and David Eager took his place. And David, coming from the tour, was pretty much in the same vein as PJ. I mean, I think if PJ had not passed away, his recommendation for his successor was David, because 1, he was a good rules person. 2, he's an excellent golfer. And 3, he kind of understood the tour player, being a tour player at one time himself, and then dealing with the PGA Tour players as his previous job. And we had 4 Opens with David that went pretty well. And then then Tom rolled into the director's position and got the clipboard and the paint can. And I think if you reflect at from 1996 to 2004, those 8 opens, there was something wrong every year.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it comes down to ego and not listening to those around you, me, Mike Davis, other people involved, and the fact that it was more fun, in my opinion, to embarrass the players than it was to put their skills on display. I don't think PJ or David were ever afraid of low scores. If someone went out and shot a great number, then they must have golfed their ball that day.
Because that happened the year before the massacre at Wingfoot, didn't it?
Well, that's when Wingfoot. Then here again,
but the year prior to Wingfoot,
you go back to '74 at Wingfoot. You know, you have a USGA president at the time, who is Sandy Tatum, excellent golfer, and wanted the U.S. Open to be the toughest test. And his famous quote, and I'll paraphrase it: "We're not here to embarrass the best players. We're here to identify the best players."
Mm-hmm.
Well, I probably want to debate that in some instances, because 6 Over won the Open in 1974, I think it was. And I may be wrong on that. Hale Irwin winning. And it was, knee-high rough and ridiculous green speeds. And it just, someone's going to win. They'll always have 156 players. You're going to have a winner at the end of the week, regardless of the condition of the golf course. Someone will golf their ball. But I think, as Joe Dye told me one time when I asked him, why don't, I didn't know anything about it. And I asked Mr. Dye one time at Oak Hill in 89, why don't we do this or why don't we do that? He said, Tim, it's easy to make the competition hard, difficult, but it's really difficult to make it fair and competitive. And you want it to be competitive. You want to have the players, in my opinion, I'm not saying it's right, and I'm not condemning those before me, but I think you want to place the abilities of the player under tough conditions. You want to see who can make it through the struggle. And I've had, players like Tom Kite who would chirp about the sun coming up in the east during the U.S. Open, and then Greg Norman saying, make it as tough as you can, but don't go over the line, because you want the best player to win. So I get it, and it's tough. The other championships are a little different. You have different levels of ability. The difference between male and female competitors, physiology, etc. The Women's Open was a test as well. Kendra made it a test, but it was a fair test. There wasn't anything goofy involved. So there were times when it got goofy, and I think a lot of it has to do with what I would call the NARP, the famous Boomer Esiason, non-athletic real people, non-agronomic real people. I think the committees and the people that don't understand turf grass and when you got to stop pushing because they mow their yard or plant a garden. No, that doesn't make you an expert in agronomy.
Right, because you said that the year.
So once it goes over the edge, I mean, look at Shinnecock, both in 2004 and 2018. 2004 was a debacle. No one would listen. Shinnecock's on a sand pile. What part of the sand pile dries out first? The top. And when the wind changes from offshore, coming off the ocean, just like here in Hilton Head, when we go from southeast to northwest, the humidity drops, which makes more moisture is going to leave the property. All the greens we had problems with in 04, 11, 9, 11, 13, 7, 17, or 7, and 18 all face north and west. They all look toward the setting sun. So the wind's going to smack them all day long. And they're sand. And then you have 18 where Mike Davis and those involved, well, we're not going to have a 2004. Well, I hope you don't. I hope you listen now after 14 years. Well, here's what happens. They have the same problem. Why? Because they're not paying attention to the position of the greens, the fact that it's a sand pile. It dries out faster, and now they get it to a point where on Saturday, you look at some of the complaints, Justin Rose, Zach Johnson, obviously Phil's brain fart on 13, which was a simple rules thing. He could have fixed very easily, but that's okay. And what do they do Saturday evening when play's completed? They start slinging water. So now you've gone from as hard as a rock to a marshmallow. Well, the players are like, well, once they figure it out that they can throw it at the flagstick, because it's not going to go bouncing into the, over to National Golf Links next door. It's a whole different ballgame. And I watched on Saturday afternoon was really kind of foolish when Mike Davis had to come on and apologize, which, he should never let it happen in the first place. But then I said to my wife, what's going to happen? And she said, what do you mean? I said, they're going to start slinging water, and you're going to have a regular PGA Tour event tomorrow. Well, the last one of the lasting shots on Saturday evening was one of the cameras from Fox is picking up the USGA green section guy with the crew member, and they're just hosing down the ninth green. Well, the first shot I see on Sunday is Koepka has 137 to the green on the first hole, and he pulls out wedge, and the ball takes one hop, and it stops 3 feet from the flag. I said, it's over.
Shootout.
Yeah.
In a shootout.
All they got to do is listen. One, most importantly, they should listen to the golf course superintendent, because that individual is on that golf course pretty much every day of the week. They know what it's like in the dark. They know what it's like in the middle of the day. They know what it's like when it's snowing, raining, blowing, not blowing. Why don't you go to that individual and say, hey, Pete, if we were to go here, what do you think would happen?
Yeah, not to mention the predictability based off of weather patterns that they know.
No one in 2004, no one paid attention to the weather. No one was paying attention to the weather. We had offshore breezes the entire week, or off ocean breezes. It was overcast and humid. We were having a hard time getting speed. And then I can recall sitting on the back porch of the clubhouse for lunch, and a couple members said, if we get this cold front move through, this place is going to be lights out tomorrow. And sure enough, by 7 o'clock Saturday evening in 2004, that golf course was done. I mean, it was dry, and the wind was blowing, the humidity dropped, and the sun was out. And what was worse in 2004 is Saturday evening into Sunday morning, the temperature dropped into the 30s, which made it even worse. Mm-hmm. No one's paying attention. So learn from your mistakes. That I don't know about the weather. I wasn't there in 2018, but I certainly can watch on TV, and I think in my humble opinion, I can tell you what's probably going to go right or wrong, because I've been there, done that, and a couple other opens at Shinnecock. And sure enough, when Saturday afternoon happened, I said, they've lost the golf course. They screwed up again. The non-agronomic people, not the superintendent, not the green section staff, not the person that has part of my old job, is probably trying to tell those that are in charge, can't do this. We're going to have a problem. And sure enough, they had a problem.
Which was a shame, because everyone was kind of holding their breath saying, we hope that 2004 doesn't get replayed.
And it did.
And I think that
it would have been a lot worse had they not had the rain on Wednesday afternoon and the overcast and sprinkles on Friday afternoon.
Well, and even more so is not the people watching, but the membership, where their course is not being shown in the best light. And
it's sad. Now, I wasn't around for the one in 1896, but I was around for 86 and 95, and both of those opens were perfect.
Mm-hmm.
Corey Pavin in 95, the 4-wood up from 210, the shot of his life, as Johnny Miller said, and that open was the way that open should be played. There's several of all. I did 21 U.S. Opens, and there's probably 5 that played like the U.S. Open should play.
Mm-hmm.
And since I left, and I'm not saying I had anything to do with it, I've watched closely, and Bethpage got rained out, and Pebble in 2010 was a disaster from a conditioning perspective. Pinehurst was, that shocked the world, and as did Chambers Bay. It crescendoed at Chambers Bay. And then they went the other direction. Now, Oakmont is Oakmont. You know what you're getting going in there, but unfortunately, they had several heavy rainstorms that took the kind of the firmness that Oakmont is expecting out of the golf course.
Yeah, the congressional as well.
And then last year at Pebble Beach, Pebble Beach just told the USGA, you're not going to do what you did in 2010. You're either going to let us kind of have input, or, once you do 2027, whatever it is, probably be your last one. So it was a little soft for me from a U.S. Open perspective, but it still was a great event,
mm-hmm.
and it came off well. Had a great champion, and it was worth watching on Sunday afternoon.
I can remember.
And I think Wingfoot is going to follow through this year. Though we had Wingfoot in 2006 was one of the 5, I would say, that was way the Open should have been played.
Right.
Now, I can't help Phil, again, having another meltdown a little bit on the 72nd tee. But that golf course in 2006 was a typical U.S. Open, and plus 4 or 5 won.
Mm-hmm. The first time I can remember it being embarrassing and seeing when you've got the most elite players in the world basically throwing their hands up. I remember the Olympic Club in '98.
Right.
When Payne Stewart putted up the hill and it stopped and it started rolling back, and he had his arms crossed, almost tapping his foot, waiting for the ball to roll back to him. And it was just, and that was just the thing that I remember most. But there are other, I can't remember what hole it was, 16 or 17, where the fairways really slope left to right.
17.
And they're hitting draws into the fairway just like they should, and it's hitting into, still kicking into the rough. That's not a test.
Yeah, and I actually got in
trickery.
trouble in 98 at Olympic because Superintendent, who we'd done the 87 Open together and a tour championship, we said, we're going to widen this fairway because there's no way. I mean, you're going to hit the perfect shot and you're going to be penalized. That doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah, it seemed during that era that it turned from identifying the best player in the world to, okay, what are they going to trick up this year?
Yeah, and it was embarrassing. And, I mean, I had to walk inside the ropes with a lot of other people. I didn't find it much fun. Now, I will tell you with Payne, you know, as a kind of a professional friend and seeing him every year and getting to know him, and he was chirping up a storm about that on Saturday afternoon. And I said, okay, when we set the hole in the morning was probably when the fastest the greens were going to be, and that location was not a problem. You know, we had Johnny Miller and Roger Maltby and everybody out there putting. We used to putted 100 times to that hole location. When the greens were as fast and smooth as they're going to be, didn't have a problem. You know, but as I said to Payne, I said, okay, you know, it's a 372-yard hole. You're probably hitting 300 to the top of the hill and letting it roll down to the bottom. He had 90 yards to an uphill green going back to front. Can't you keep it below the hole? Now, that's my ignorance in saying it's, you know, a simple little shot keeping it below the hole. And because, you know, you watch Nicklaus when he played, where did he do? He hit it down
Middle
90
green,
yards and
yeah.
kept it below the hole. He two-putted, made par, and went home. Because I remember sitting in the locker room next to Fuzzy Zeller, who was giving me all sorts of stuff, and we'd known each other for years. And he's like, okay, here comes God himself, the world's greatest player. Let's see what he does. Hits it down to the bottom of the hill, keeps wedge below the hole, 2 putts for 4, and I'm like, okay, there you go, partner. You know, 19 majors, and I know you've won a couple, but the greatest player in the world's got it figured out. So it's debated, and teasingly, and Payne gave me a lot of stuff year after year. I said, listen, let me ask you one question. That was at Augusta National. Would you have said a word? He said, of course not. I said, well, yeah, there you go. So we had some fun with it, and yeah, you know, you make a mistake, and if the saying goes, and I remember PJ always saying, if you've not set a bad hole location in your life as a tournament person, you will. You know, it's going to happen. So now there's so many different technologies to keep that from happening. You know, at Pinehurst in 05? Yes, 05 I think it was. Tom Marzoff from the Fazio Design Group, he and I were doing with percent slopes based on green speeds, and you didn't want to have a slope on a green more than 3.5%, or
Right.
The ball would.
You can't keep
You know,
it
those
on the green.
greens were upside down spoons, and they only had 500 or 600 square feet of flat surface. Now they've rebuilt those. I don't know what they look like today, but back at 99 and 05, he only had 500-600 square feet of flat surface on the entire. And that was actually one of the conversations I had with Payne in 99. He said, how do you play these greens? I said, you're asking the wrong guy, but I will give you one tip. When we rebuilt these in 95, there's only 600 square feet of flats. And I said, I'm going to overstate the obvious, and I'm going to say, you know, hit it in the middle of the green. Do not chase some of these flag sticks. And I don't know if he paid any attention to me. Obviously he won, but it had nothing to do with me. But he's trying to go for a flag, and then the ball's rolling off, and
You miss it by a foot, and
exactly
you can't get up and down.
And that's what it's all about. So middle of the green works. 2-putt par works. So
What was your favorite course to set up?
that's a really good question. Wow, I would have to. Well, I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings. My favorite Open was the Country Club in 1988. That was everything the U.S. Open. Curtis Strange and Faldo in a playoff. That everything worked at that time. Boy, I thought Bethpage was pretty cool in '02.
Mm-hmm.
And then again, Oakmont in '07 was probably as perfect a conditioned golf course that I'd ever seen. And that was going to be hard because in 1997 at Congressional, it was Augusta-like. Mr. Latshaw was the superintendent. He had also worked at Augusta. And we had no player complaints. Usually you get somebody. I mean, Tom Kite didn't even complain, and that's unusual. So to have Tom not complain about something must have been the whole thing was pretty good. But setting up, the options that you have, Shinnecock is one of those that gives you a lot of options of the opens that I was participating in.
What was the hardest setup that you've seen?
From playing difficulty?
Yeah.
Wow. I would have to say Oakmont in '07. I mean, that was pretty tough. I mean, those greens were 15 and a half on the stent meter, and they were rock hard. I don't know how the guys did it. When DJ won at Oakmont in '16, he had and I'll be kind because John Zimmer is a dear friend of mine as a superintendent. They were a little softer because they had the rain. Mm-hmm. And Oakmont, they won't let those greens be rebuilt. You can rebuild them and put drainage systems in with suction units that will suck the water out of the profile and firm them up just like Augusta and sports fields, stadiums, the Sub Air Company and Precision Air. They do a lot of that good stuff. But I think '07 was probably as tough as it because the rough was up, the fairways were narrow. I mean, the approaches to the greens came out 40 yards in front of the greens, and they were stemping at 11 and a half. I mean, it was an incredibly hard test of golf.
2001 Pebble Beach. You were obviously involved at that time in course setup and so forth. When Tiger did what he did to that golf course, what's running through your mind?
It's outstanding. I mean, that was outstanding.
I mean,
I was just sitting and watching on TV, and then just come out of your chair every time he hit a shot.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he you know how it is. I mean, the best get on a roll. I don't care whatever the sport is. When the best perform at a level that they're basically unconscious, it was a real treat to watch. And it wasn't an embarrassment. He was the best player in the world playing a golf course that he had no fear. And, I mean, Ernie was 15 shots back.
It's amazing.
And Miguel Jimenez, they were, whatever it was, +3,
mm-hmm.
which would have been a perfect score for the Open. Ernie could have won his third Open, potentially maybe in a playoff, or Miguel could have won his first. But Tiger, I mean, that was just unbelievable. Unbelievable.
Is someone in your position that helps set up the course and gets it right and everything? I mean, do you just throw up your hands and say this is...
No, I don't throw up my hands. I think you do your job. You meet the criteria of the setup memo. You give them firm greens, fast greens. I mean, the place is pristine. It was a little wind burnt, which it should look a little wind burnt.
Mm-hmm.
And then, let the boys have at it. And Tiger just played super great. It was extraordinary what he did. That shot out of the rough on 6 with a 7-iron from 210 out of 8-inch rough uphill to a blind green. I'm sorry, we're done. I'm going home.
It's all over.
I'm going to go watch. I'm going to watch MASH reruns because we're done.
How did in the 2 decades you were at the USJ? How did the culture change from when you got there to when you left, or did it?
Culture, as in,
as far as within the what do you call? Would you call it a company? The organization.
Okay, I think it did because I think we went from an association,
mm-hmm.
Keepers of the game, so to speak, to an organization and a profit generated organization.
Even though they say it's a nonprofit.
Correct. And there was the USJ was always identified with the elitist blue bloods and the elite private equity clubs, and yeah, there was some of that, and that's just the way it goes. They did have. I mean, they've done so much for the game from a public relations perspective that I think they're trying to kind of get rid of that old image.
Mm-hmm.
But some of that dies hard, and that's just the way it goes. But I think they've done a pretty good job in getting out of that, navy blazer, ham and bean soup stain on the tie image of the stockbroker from Baltusrol or Wingfoot being
Right.
on the executive committee. I think it's a very diverse group. It's a very knowledgeable group. And I think they're really trying to do what's in the best interest of the game.
Do you think, like most governing entities, that they have maybe fallen prey to their own authority, and that they don't have, there's nobody that they have to answer to, and they kind of maybe
when you
take
make up
their
the
liberties a
rules
little
as
too
you go
much?
along, I guess that's the way it goes. Frank Hannigan told me, again, I'll paraphrase, David Fay always echoed it, and saying we are a self-appointed governing body that governs with all the power we invest in ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, someone has to. And, you try to do it with good intentions for the good of the game, as always. But, it's human nature. It's ego. It's hard to kind of separate yourself from the notoriety and that you're sitting at the center of the universe for golf. And you have input on which way the wind's going to blow. It's pretty interesting. That power thing gets to some people. And, I think you're only as good as your last day. And, it was always for me, good days and bad, it was still a privilege to work there.
When you parted ways with the USGA, that was big news within the industry. I remember reading it on the inside cover of Golf Week magazine, and it was in the second or third page of Golf World. I mean, it wasn't some little light thing, but what did you learn most about yourself through that time?
Well, that everybody's tough. I'm not the only one that's ever going to get let go,
Mm-hmm.
have their career redirected, whatever the expression is, you're fired, as Donald Trump would say on a TV show. Everybody goes through that. You're only as good as your last day. But I think, and I know what went on and why it went on. And I wasn't the only one. There was another 30 some odd people that went through the same thing that I did for really kind of silly reasons. But that's okay. You become a better person. It's the old, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. But what it's done for me is seeing that I went through it at the highest level. And my and many others' dismissal was public knowledge. So now when I work with clubs and, a superintendent gets fired for no reason, or a general manager or some young kid, I can relate to what you went through. And it's not the end of the world. There is life after the USGA. I think I've done pretty good in 12 years away from the mothership, in spite of them thinking I wouldn't. So, to you. But, what I went through, hopefully I can use to help others. And let them recognize I can't help you if you're drinking and stealing from the club. That's your problem.
Yeah, that's a little different.
But if you're a victim, and you win the Stanley Cup one year, I'm a hockey guy, and then you don't make the playoffs the next year, you get fired. Well, I can deal with that. That's just business. But when you're kind of let go for interesting reasons, I always am one to be able to reach out to people and say, hey, I've been there. And people had to read about it and comment on it, whether you liked me or not,
Mm-hmm.
so I can help other people go through it.
Well, I mean, if anybody, and hopefully they do, look you up on the internet and see what you do and so on, but even some of the old chat rooms, and I've been around enough people in this industry, and I mentioned your name, and the chat rooms of people I talk to, and you can mention your name just about in any avenue of this business, and there's a tremendous amount of respect. So you've done a lot of good things. Obviously, you don't just in this game. You just don't. People don't hand you respect, especially after a lifetime. And
as my dad always said, leave it a little better and you found it.
Yep, and the work you did. Obviously, it's on national television.
Yeah, I had a few people watching. 40 million, whatever. No, I mean I get it, and it's all relative. And again, I was blessed to have that position. I wish I had it a little longer. It didn't work out. It's not the end of the world. So maybe my lot in life, the good Lord said, okay, we're going to test you, but you're going to be able to help others. And at the end of the day, that's all that it's about.
Did you
trying
find,
to make someone else better?
Did you find that it going from a level of comfort because you had been there for so long to now there's an oh shit, what am I going to do moment?
Oh yeah, I still have those today. I had one last week. It's just, you're on your own, and now you don't get that paycheck every 2 weeks,
right?
No matter whether you perform or not. I got to perform every time. I'm always interviewing for jobs. I'm always negotiating to try to get people to believe I have a skill set that they need. So yeah, you're only as good. And I'll tell you that story. It's really a great story. And I tell it when I speak, especially to young people. When I was at Las Colinas and we opened up, we had all the celebrities come out and do the play thing. And this was before the Byron Nelson. Well, of course, this is back in the early 80s.
And you were the superintendent.
I was the golf course superintendent. Now, this is the height of the Dallas Cowboys. I mean, this is Dallas. Mm-hmm. So, of course, we had Coach Landry come out. And he would play a hole with all the groups. And it was kind of cool. So I get to the group, and there's Tom Landry, and I was like, holy, this is the coach.
Did he have the hat on, the fedora?
No, I don't remember. I think he did. So anyways, we were walking. It was on the 13th hole, and I remember we walked down, and I'm just playing, and he said, well, who are you? What do you do? And I said, I'm nobody. I'm just the golf course superintendent. He said, wait a minute. What do you mean you're not anybody? I said, well, what do you do? I said, I take care of the golf course. He said, well, okay, let me ask you a couple of questions. And I said, what are you talking about? And he said, and I apologize for being a New York Giant fan, but he said, they're no big deal, so we don't worry about it. So he said, well, do you have a game plan for the golf course? And I said, yeah, well, so do I. He said, do you motivate people to get a job done, to have specialists to do one thing or another? And I said, yeah, I guess you do. And he said, do you have a kind of like, he said, my goal is the Super Bowl. What's your goal? And I said, well, Byron Nelson Golf Classic in a couple of weeks. He said, you are absolutely no different than what I do. I said, Coach, come on. There's just no way. He said, no, you are, and I'm going to give you one piece of advice. And I said, yes, sir, what's that? He said, you're only as good as your last day. Remember that. And this business is no different than coaching. It's not, I could win the Super Bowl for the last 5 years, but they want to know what I'm going to do this year. Mm-hmm. And I said, wow. So I tell that story a lot because it meant a lot coming from a guy like that, that's in the public eye and is a huge persona, is under scrutiny from every aspect and what he has to deal with. That's the golf course superintendent. Actually, Roy Williams, the basketball coach at UNC, said the same thing. The two worst jobs in America, basketball coaches and superintendents. So if I can, all that's takeaway over 40 years, that if I can help someone in their 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, or 60s survive in an interesting business that we're all in, from something that I went through under the public microscope, then I'm going to leave the planet better than I found it.
Yeah, and that industry in particular, because you get Greens Committee people changing over time, and
there's no consistency.
There's no consistency, and if somebody's wife or partner or whatever it is, or a partner in the member guest said, well, these Greens are just a little too much this, too much that, and we have this at our club. Next thing, if they say it to the wrong person, the superintendent's gone. Yeah. Which is really an unfair situation.
No one understands the life of a golf course superintendent. All you got to do is look at most people's hands that criticize. Mm-hmm. They look down there. There's working hands, and then there's not. And I don't care if it ticks anybody off, because I will always defend the golf course superintendent and their staffs.
Mm-hmm. With all that you've gone through in the career that you've had, what do you value now that maybe you took for granted when you were younger?
Tomorrow. I'm not going to take tomorrow for granted. I took it for granted 30 years ago because you're bulletproof. I'm not bulletproof anymore. So I'm not going to take tomorrow. If I make it to tomorrow morning, I'm not going to take it for granted. I go back to what my dad say. You should always leave something better than you found it, and you should go to bed smarter than you woke up. And that's exactly what I try to do.
If you had a mulligan, is there anything you'd do over again?
Oh, baby. Probably study a little harder. Probably would have, I've had a pretty good ride, Pete. I don't know. I mean, I think do I have any regrets? Not really. Should I have gone to the University of Miami instead of Niagara University? Yeah, maybe. But I had a really great time at Niagara University, and I don't, I regret a day of that. My career was done the way I think it should be done. I was at the top of the heap for quite a long time. Mm-hmm. I think, honestly, if you asked people back in 1986, they probably said, this guy's not going to last 3 weeks. And I think there's probably half a dozen people. I think there's a half a dozen people that probably do my old job today that I did by myself for all 14 championships. So I was pretty proud of that. I've met people like you. I've been all over the world. I love playing golf. I don't play well. I miss a well-struck 5-iron is one of the 3 greatest feelings in the world. So there's not a lot. The only thing I really miss, I would like to have a do-over with my dad in that I wish we'd played more golf together.
Mm-hmm.
And he was a great guy in that he never said, you got to play golf. He said, I don't care if you play tiddlywinks, just give it 100%. So I played tennis, hockey, swam, whatever it was, just to give it 100%. He said, you'll fall into golf at some point and you'll find what a cool sport it is. And I have. I love playing golf. I love every aspect of it, from being outdoors to hitting the right shot to playing the hole. And then being around good friends. You and I have played a lot of golf together. We've had some fun. And hopefully I can do it again tomorrow. That's pretty much it.
In most industries, the next great thing usually comes from the periphery. It doesn't come from the nucleus or the day-to-day thing. What do you see from your side of the industry that might be the next great thing that's kind of maybe out there? Because you still get to a lot of places, you still talk to a lot of people. You're in the business, but you also have always been able to see those things.
2 things that really stick out to me from a technological perspective are irrigation systems, because water is the new gold.
Mm-hmm.
And I think our GPS and robotics, which is good because we'll have consistency through robotics and all the global positioning stuff, but it'll be bad because it'll put people out of work. What's out there and what's coming I think Chris Tridabaugh, who is the golf course superintendent at Hazeltine, has done the women's PGA, the Ryder Cup, things like they're going to get another PGA or Ryder Cup at some point. And I think with the Ryder Cup, he wants to do it, all the fairway green mowing, etc., with robotics. I mean,
wow.
That's coming. I think the breeding of grasses for disease, insect, weed resistance is going to be paramount. And then some of the water savings programs. Because there's just only so much of it.
Mm-hmm.
The one thing I think that's going to hurt our business, and whether you like it or not, and whether it's politically charged or not, is climate change. We're in a period where the climate really, really impacts the golf course and the golf course superintendent. Now, whether it's a blip on a billion-year-old planet that we may be in a warming trend for 1,000 years, and no one today is going to be able to debate that fact if the weather goes to Arctic, 1,000 years from now. But right now we're in that trend where we're environmentally in a precarious position, and the rains and the temperatures and things are really screwing up the superintendent's lives.
Mm-hmm.
There are weeds in New Jersey that are growing that never grew in New Jersey before. There are bugs here in South Carolina that were never here before because they've been blown up from storms and the temperature changes and the rain that we're getting. I think we really have to be, the golf is on the land. So anybody that plays golf, loves this game, has to be a steward of the land so that this great game always continues.
I would agree. Do what you can, do your part.
That's it.
What are some of the things that you see in the industry, because you consult a lot now, that just make you roll your eyes and one of those WTF moments?
That's a good one. I think, I will tell you that the one that always rolls my eye are kind of green committees, misdirected green committees, where they're not keeping the best interests of the golf course, and they're trying to do something on the golf course. They're putting that square peg in a round hole on the golf course. I think it really comes more with, architecture has kind of calmed down a little bit from the 70s and 80s, where it was a kind of a, cookie cutter, factory production belt of golf courses going out there. There's some really cool work being done. There's some really aesthetically pleasing and challenging golf course design. But what really makes my eyes roll is I think, just what people are trying to do to a golf course that they have no knowledge of what they're doing. I don't think it's not that hard to figure out. It's pretty straightforward. And really let the people that do this for a living make the decisions.
Yeah, our buddy Mick used to always say he couldn't wait till he retired, where he would, that day, he would know everything there is to know about growing grass.
Well, again, it's the non-agronomic real person that really doesn't get it. They think because they've been playing golf their entire life, they know something about golf. Well, they don't. They really don't, unless they really delved into the history or they jumped into agronomy or teaching or design where they really are fascinated by it. There's just too much information out there. Grass growing, again, it's not your home yard. You just because you throw a little Moraghanite out there and you mow it and maybe turn the irrigation system on and forget about it.
Yeah, just because you can stripe your front yard doesn't mean you know how to grow grass on a golf course.
It really isn't. And but I think the non-agronomic person really is afraid of the science. And now it's a double-edged sword because our people in our industry get way too technical on everything. And they really, because we're, as I always said, we're kind of the Rodney Dangerfields of the golf industry. We get no respect. Mm-hmm. We're evenly balanced because we got a chip on each shoulder. So, we're always looking to get the respect. And I think you're never going to win everybody's respect, but if you win the people that really care, that's what you want to do.
Pretty good stuff.
We could go on for a while, couldn't we?
Right, yeah, when we have. Want some rapid fire?
Fire away.
With some rapid
Whatever
fire?
You got to do.
Your favorite architect?
Pete Dye. Modern architect, Pete Dye. Old school. I would have to be a Tillinghast guy.
Go-to word if you miss a shot?
I can't say that on the air.
I've heard it enough. I'll know that. If anyone wants to know that, they can email me or get a hold of me. Biggest pet peeve?
In golf or in life?
Golf. Well, let's do both.
All right. In golf, ball marks. Drives me crazy.
People
ball marks and
unraked
unraked bunker. How can you? I had a guy here, and another club I belonged to in New Jersey actually trip over the rake in the bunker, and then have the audacity. What's this thing doing here? I said, here, let me show you what it's for. Oh, I thought the ground staff did that. No, that's part of the etiquette of the game. I just think that shows lack of respect for the playing field. And again, my dad was, you're not going to play golf until you know what you're supposed to do as a golfer. And in golf, it's ball marks and unraked footprints in bunkers. In life, it's people that drive that don't pay attention to stop signs, stoplights. I don't get that. And there's a gross misunderstanding in this world of the word yield. And they what the Department of Transportation needs to do is put the definition of yield on a sign below the sign that says yield, so that people know what the hell that means. But as my wife said, you're never going to fix each individual one at a time. I said, I'm going to try. And there's a growing number of us that are going to continue to try to do that, but this might be a lost cause.
Anyone in the world or in history's golf swing that you could, if you could pick any swing to have, whose would it be?
Pretty obvious, Byron Nelson. I mean, we built the damn machine at Golf House and named it Iron Byron. That was the smoothest swing in the world.
You told me an interesting story. I can't remember details about him, but you got to meet him and.
Oh, he was great. He was like my grandfather. He was great. And to meet, when I was asked at the end of the Players Championship in 1992, if history will tell you, and I may, people can question that, but Dean Beeman wanted to do these stadium courses around the country. This was going to be, have a couple dozen stadium courses built specifically to host golf tournaments. So at the end of it, now we've got this great talented staff on the grounds at TPC Ponte Vedra. And, they're doing these other properties. So where do you want to go, Tim? You can go to Colorado. You can go to Florida. We can go to Dallas. Yeah, Dallas sounds pretty cool. Never been to Texas. Let's go to Texas. So I flew out and interviewed with the people at Las Colinas Sports Club, got the job, and they're going to host the Byron Nelson. They were moving it from Preston Trails over to Las Colinas, and called the Byron Nelson. So I got to meet Mr. Nelson. And I mean, it was just one cool story after another about him. And he was just so nice. And the one story that I will tell you, and I've told you this before, was when he would, when he was, this was in the early 80s, so he probably was in his mid to late 60s at that time. And Watson was kind of his protege, Tom Watson. He was, the number one player in the world, and Tom would come and hit balls on our range with Mr. Nelson. So that was pretty cool. So I'd sit up in my truckster up at the top of the hill and watch him hit balls. I mean, it's Nelson and Watson hitting balls. It doesn't get any better than that. So Mr. Nelson waved me down because he wanted to introduce me to Tom, and we introduced. And Timmy takes care of the golf course, and Tommy's in this, and Mr. Nelson's swinging away and just hit these perfect 6 irons. And so I asked Mr. Nelson. I said, if you were to play Tom 10 times today, or in your prime, if you were to play Tom 10 times, would you ever beat him? Because all I know is Tom Watson. I never saw Byron Nelson play. He looked at me like I had just, kicked his dog. And he said, if we played 10 times, I would beat him 9 out of 10 times, and he'd be damn lucky to beat me the one time he would beat me. I was like, oh, crap, I pissed him off. Now I'm in big trouble. And Watson looks at me, and he goes, he's right. He says, it's one of the greatest. He says, this is one of the greatest players ever play the game. So I'm what am I, 25, 26? What do I know? Mm-hmm. And Mr. Nelson hit a few more 6 irons with a little emotion, and he spins around. He looks at me, he says, you know what? I'll tell you one more thing. This is 1983, remember. If I had the equipment these boys have today, I never would have lost. Just as matter of fact, I got to go. I got to go rake a bug. I got to do something, but I'm getting out of here. But he was just super. He was so nice, but he was good. Mm-hmm. He when he had to put the extra grind mode on, he did. And that was pretty cool, meeting Mr. Nelson.
It's interesting you said about equipment, because I remember playing in a tour event at Sedgefield. And I can't remember what it was like. I think the 4th hole, it's par 3, or a par 4. The next hole was a par 3, but I know it was in the first few. Anyway, we're down in the fairway, and there was a plaque in the fairway that said 136 yards or 138 yards. Byron Nelson hold out here with a 6 iron in the 38 Greensboro Open. I was like, that's really cool.
Well, what's really cool, I don't mean, and this is not to be a one-upsman. I don't know how these guys, whenever I played a course and there was a plaque like that, I try to hit the same shot, mm-hmm. right? So we had one when I was a member at Baldur's Row. Obviously, Nicklaus's 1 iron on 18 at the lower, but Philadelphia Country Club was Byron's 3 iron from 213 to basically win the Open there. And I'm looking at that plaque, and I'm looking at the green, and in 1936 or 7, whenever it was, I apologize for my history being wrong, he had 3 iron. I'm like, you got to be kidding me. In a jar, I guess, or something like that.
Yeah, that's like today's 6 iron.
I'm like, holy crap. I mean, that's amazing. Mm-hmm. So the guys had talent. So the argument could Mr. Nelson and that group compete today? Oh, yeah. To give them today's conditions, Mr. Nelson used to tell me how bad conditioning was. He said, he told me at Pebble,
oil greens, oil and sand greens.
Sand. But he said, they make a big deal on the TV people about, Pete Povovich hit on a par 5, hit his second shot in the bunker. He said, we used to do that all the time. He said, and I said, why? He said, I knew what I was getting. I knew what I was doing when I got in that bunker, but around the green, you didn't know what you were going to get back in the day. So he said, this is nothing new. We got to play the game the same as always played. Get the ball in the hole with as few strokes as possible.
If you weren't an agronomist, you would have been a what?
If I didn't have the career I had, my dream job would be to play right wing for the New York Rangers.
Did you have a chance?
No, I wish. Only in my dreams. I'm a huge Ranger fan, as you know, but that would have been fun. I would love to have the talent to do that because I love hockey. I mean, between golf and hockey, it's pretty cool. But that would have been if I couldn't do it. That would have been it. But in golf, I think. And we all think we could be good at architecture, but because I've worked around some of the greatest architects and seen the greatest courses, I think I'd have fun I'd like to try that someday. Mm-hmm. If it would be, that would be kind of a different career because it's a very difficult profession to be successful at. Yeah,
there's only a few.
The golf course architects, right? There's a lot of talent out there, but I don't know why only a certain few seem to get the notoriety because there's so many guys and women, that are not even mentioned in the same breath, that are just as talented as a Gil Hance or an Andrew Green or a Tom Doak. I mean, one of my favorites is a guy named Andy Staples. I think he does really, really good work. The list goes on and on.
Tiger or Jack? Greatest
Jack.
of all time.
Jack.
You know, of all the people I've asked, I think it's about split 50-50.
And I think Tiger would say Jack, and Jack would say Tiger.
Mm-hmm.
But it's A and A1. That's what it comes down to. You can't get him because I think Jack, given today's equipment, would really be a superior player with his mental strength. But I think you give Tiger the stuff that Jack had to deal with, and he would be just as good.
Right. If they made a movie about your life, who would play you?
Holy crap. Bozo the Clown, maybe. I don't know. I wouldn't even think about who would make him. Jeepers. Wow. That's a good question. Never even thought about it that way. I don't know, because That's interesting. I have to come back to that one.
Okay.
I have no answer for that.
No problem. That's a simpler one. Favorite golf course?
In this country?
Wherever you want. You've seen
I got a lot of
just
them.
about all of them.
But I tell you, too, that Baltusrol's upper course and Riviera in this country. And Pinehurst number 2. Globally, it's hard to beat the old course. I could play that place every day.
Yeah, I'm sure a lot of people could.
I mean, it's awesome.
Any bucket list courses that you haven't gone to yet?
Fisher's Island and Camargo.
I know Fisher's Island. Where's Camargo?
Outside of Cincinnati. That's a real cool one. My kind of golf. You would enjoy it because it'd be your kind of golf.
Now, you've been all over the world with your job and past, present. Strangest thing you've ever eaten?
Well, I was offered dog in Korea, but I turned it down.
Good for you.
But I live octopus was an interesting,
Ooh.
That
fit the bill of strangest things.
Yeah, live octopus for sushi at the top of the Shangri-La Hotel in Hong Kong.
Yeah, you got me beat. I don't think I could have done it.
Yeah, but I had to because the owner of the golf course that I was consulting to owned the Shangri-La hotel chain, and he closed down the sushi restaurant so he and I could have a private lunch. So at that point, whatever he threw in front of me, I was eating.
The mermaid.
Whatever. I'm going to have a bite of whatever's put down in front of me.
Last one. If you were playing in the Ryder Cup, your walk-up song to the first tee would be what?
When the Music's Over by the Doors.
I thought it would be that one, knowing your love of the Doors. You've done a lot of things in the game, a lot of things in your career. What's next? What's next for Tim Morgan?
I have no idea. Again, I'm grateful for tomorrow. You never know what's going to happen. That's the way the good Lord works. I have no idea what's next. I'm open for just about anything. I have had a great ride. I would like to write a book, more of a life lesson book about golf and what it's meant to me and some of the interesting stories and people and places I've been and it's just kind of been an amazing ride. I don't know why I got to do it, but I'm pretty thankful. But I honestly don't know what's next.
Sometimes that's a good thing.
Yep. I'm open for a lot of things.
You speaking or presenting anywhere that anyone listening, they can kind of check you out?
Not right now. I haven't done anything yet. I know, a lot of people, the speaking circuit, there's a lot of good people out there. I've given a seminar at the Golf Industry Show for the last 10 years on tournament preparation. This time, I talked to the GCSA. It's kind of time for a break, but I'm hopefully going to have a meeting with them in a week or so and try to get back on track with another seminar. Mm-hmm. I'm very lucky to write 2 columns for Golf Course Industry Magazine and the Ohio Superintendent Network. And I'm going to do my next column is on club politics for the superintendent. Some of the things that no one teaches you how to handle yourself in a boardroom. And some of the things I've learned, with politics and as a president once told me, politics is poly meaning many and tick being blood-sucking insect. So I think people have to learn how to survive, especially our golf course superintendents and the next generation, the 20 and 30 something. So I think I'm going to present that to the GCSA as, how do you swim through club politics.
Mm-hmm. If someone was listening and they want to reach out to you, whether it's a facility that wants to bring you in to consult, someone wants you to do a guest speaker, what's the best way to reach you? Phone, website?
Best way is first the website, which is Aspire, ASPIRE-golf, GOLF, aspiregolf.com. On there, you'll get all the information you need about every aspect of Aspire Golf, and I'm always open to have anybody call me on my cell phone, which is 908-635-7978.
And for anyone listening, I'll have that in the description. That they can click on there, and it'll direct link to your stuff.
Thank you.
Social media handle?
AspireGolf.com. It's on Twitter.
Okay.
Facebook, I'm kind of off Facebook for a little bit. I had my LinkedIn account hacked, but I'm back on LinkedIn. So, but most of my my insights, for whatever that means, is on Twitter.
Anything on Instagram?
No.
Probably a good thing. Keep
I don't
the
know.
social media.
There's LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter. That's a lot of things that I don't have the time to just do that kind of stuff. I'd rather do other things.
I think we've known each other about 15 years.
Yeah, it's been since we first moved down. It may be longer than that. I think we started playing golf before I even moved down here.
Yep.
We've been Karen and I before we bought the condo. So it's been getting close to 20 years.
Yeah, it is. I enjoyed pleasure learning from you things about agronomy and course setup and how to play a course different, hearing the stories and just having you as a friend. Thank you for coming on.
Well, the feeling is mutual because my golf game has got considerably better. But I think I really appreciate it, and the friendship is there. So I thank you for having me on, and thank you for being a friend.
All right, this has been awesome. Thanks. Let's go hit some balls.
All right, I'm in.
All right, everybody. Thank you so much for listening to today's show. If you enjoyed it, you can find more information on today's episode and other topics at golf360.blog. There you'll find the show notes and links related to this episode, as well as any other episode that we've done so far to date. If you're interested in improving your game and would like to learn more from yours truly by taking a private lesson, a half-day or multi-day school, club or putter fitting, you can reach me through the blog site or by email, pete@golf360.blog. So some of you may be asking, what is the golf paradigm? All you have to do is click on the homepage while on my blog site to discover how you can start playing better than you ever thought possible. Or you can simply sign up, again, on the blog page for my instructional videos where I give regular tips on all areas of the game to include the swing, club design and fitting, health, fitness and nutrition, the mental aspects, and equally as important, the integration of all those things together. I'm also on social media, and you can find me at The Golf Paradigm. That's PARADIGM. And I'm on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel, also under the same name, The Golf Paradigm. Facebook is usually the best way to reach me for questions and or comments, and I look forward to hearing what all of you have to say.